Bonjour, oula, c'est très fort. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Pour ceux qui nous rejoignent dans cet après-midi de discussion consacrée aux artistes femmes. I'm going to switch into English because all these panel discussions, I'm sorry with this sound, it's a bit strange. All these panel discussions are given in English. Is it okay? Can you hear? Okay. Okay. So again, I'm going to do a kind of short introduction before introducing my guest for this discussion. This conversation, the title of this conversation is it only up to women to champion? Sorry. Can you hear me? Yes? No? It's very strange. Is it okay? Yeah. So the title of this conversation is it only up to women to champion female artists? And I wanted this kind of provocative title, and I'm sure you are going to understand why, because with this discussion, this conversation, I would like really to discuss about these different views, different ways of approaching this issue about having more women artists in different projects, in exhibitions, in books, in collections. Of course, times have changed. Of course, we see there's a kind of slow transition to gender parity in the art world. And I gave the figures earlier this afternoon, but for you who didn't attend to the first panel, I can tell you that at Paris Photo this year, we reached 34% of female artists represented. And when this program, LX Paris Photo, started, this program really that highlights works by female artists, the percentage was 20 for female artists. So we really see that in a couple of years already, there's more representation of female photographers. And of course, we all know that there are many projects going on all over the world, and mostly with big museums. And we discussed earlier today the project by the National Gallery of Art in Washington, that dedicates now a big exhibition to female photographers. And I mentioned earlier also the Musée d'Orsay, who's afraid of women's photographer. There were these different exhibitions at Centre Pompidou who promoted female artists. And all these, of course, projects mean a lot also for encouraging galleries, encouraging academics, encouraging private collection also to really focus more on women's artists. Of course, with this panel discussion, for me, it is also to address the following issue. Women find self-promotion more difficult than men, and as I'm also the director of a museum and a curator, and I really have the feeling that I'm much less approached in general by women's artists than by men artists. So this question of self-promotion, because of course, when you work as an artist in a career and you mostly work alone, you need a network. You need to have people around you. And for me, it is also a way to discuss this issue of how you can be supported by people. And I have to say that if I'm involved today in this program dedicated to women's artists, it's because as a woman also I feel responsible as a museum director, as a curator, that I should make sure that women's artists are part of my projects. So I wanted really to bring that discussion today and to reflect Also, again, on this lack of visibility offered to women's artists, but maybe not just women's artists, but we can also open our eyes on all minorities, and maybe this is also an opportunity to discuss that, and not just to limit the discussion to this category. And I don't want to limit women to a category, but I really want to discuss with my guest how we can, what actions can be done, and how we can make sure that collections, exhibitions, books are more representative of the society. So I'm going to introduce you my guest. I have Charlotte EYERMAN here, who represents the J.P. Morgan Chase collection. Susan Bright, sitting next to Charlotte, she's an independent curator based in London, and Matylda TASZYCKA, who is here in Paris. And we are going to start the discussion with Matylda. Matylda is an art historian, curator, art critic, and she's responsible for the scientific programs of AWARE, Archives of Women Artists, Research and Exhibitions, co-founded and directed by Camille Morino. Camille Morino is this well-known curator, and I'm sure you've heard about, or you visited the exhibition she made at Centre Pompidou, and maybe Matylda will say a few words about that. Today, Matylda represents here the association AWARE, which aims to make 19th and 20th century women's artists visible by producing and distribution content. For me, it was very important to invite in this panel the association AWARE, because I really have the feeling it's not just for photography, but you are going to explain what it is. But I really have the feeling that when also the academic world, the universities, not just museums, not just people working in exhibition, not just people working in gallery, that when we have the researches behind, it's also help. So Matylda, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalie, for the invitation. I'm really honored to be part of this talk among so brilliant co-speakers. So today I represent AWARE. AWARE is archives of women artists, research and exhibitions, a French non-profit organization founded in 2014 by Camille Morino that Natalie presented. She's a French art historian, curator, well known for the big show she curated at Centre Pompidou 2009, ELLES au Centre Pompidou, which was one of the first, probably the first huge, at this, I'm talking about the size, all-women show in a French institution at that time. Our aim is to create and spread information about women artists from the 19th and 20th century. We just, where does it go? Where does it? I should wait. So we just moved to the Villa Vassiliev in Montparnasse, which will open to the public soon in January 2022. And I wanted to show you just a photo of the place. As you can see on the picture, we have a documentation center, which includes exhibition catalogs, monographs, theoretical books on women artists and feminist art. AWARE is born from the exhibition project ELLES au Centre Pompidou, in the sense that at that time Camille discovered many works hidden in the collections of Musée National d'Art Moderne, Centre Pompidou, but she realized how many artists who were present in the collection were actually not researched, and we didn't have any information about them. We didn't know where they studied, who were the artists she trained with. So she realized that digital basis on women artists was necessary to keep on exhibiting them. We also publish books and organize symposiums and talks and study days on these topics. Some of them are online. And in 2017, we created the Aware Prize for Women Artists with the French Ministry of Culture. So when we will talk about the way we can push forward the presence of women artists in the art world, I think we can also speak about different prizes and awards. So I'll try to show you the prize. And this year, we awarded the American-French artist Barbara Chase Ribou, who received our Outstanding Merit Prize, and Gaël Chouan, who received the prize for the Emerging Artists. However, probably the most powerful tool of AWARE is our website. Our website, which is seen by more than 60,000 users every month. It's bilingual, it's free, and its different content includes articles, interviews, films, podcasts, and other recordings, and especially our dictionary of women artists with its 800 entries, actually more than 800 today. We currently have 246 entries on artists born between 1790 and 1972 who worked with photography. And I wanted to show you some examples, some historical examples. For example, Anna Atkins, who was one of the pioneers of photography. She realized the cyanotypes on seaweed and ferns. And I'm waiting for the next slide with the very renowned artists of the 19th century, but it's quite slow. I'll try again. So the next artist is Julia Margaret Cameron. And I wanted to show you not only the text, which is on our website, oh, here it is, but also a little cartoon that we produced on this artist, because when we speak about gender parity, I think we need to speak also about education. And it's not only the education in the universities, but it's really from the very first age. So at AWARE, we try now to address also other publics, larger publics, and young publics. So we started to produce cartoons on women artists to make them visible for the youngest public. Another artist I wanted to show you from our website, Frances Benjamin Johnstone. I also chose her because her career replies somehow is an answer also to the question of the day. So, female photographer, but also curator, even is maybe the anachronism to say this. But in 1901, Frances Benjamin Johnstone organized an exhibition of American women photographers at the, what was the name of the place? I forgot. Photo Club in Paris. So her idea was to encourage the practice of photography among women. And she also wrote this article, What a Woman Can Do with a Camera. Another artist who was involved in promotion of photography among other women was the French photographer Laure Albangio. Another artist from the website, very known, Imogen Cunningham. And you also see how this website functions. You have on the left side the keywords. So it's very easy to navigate through our contents. You have this biographic text, which is very much focused on the work, not only the biography in the sense, like in the sense of the personal experience. And it's very well illustrated, which is important for us, that all these texts are accompanied with the images. Germaine Krull, Berenice Abbott. Dora Maar, on whom we also produced a cartoon, and it was important for us to show her as photographer and not as a muse. But also artists who are not Western artists, it's important to aware to go beyond the French, British, North American art scene. So I just wanted to show you some examples like this, so Hungarian artist Judith Karas or Czech photographer Bela Kolarzowa. Mexican artist Graciela Iturbide. Sofia Kulik, Polish photographer. I'm Polish and I particularly like this artist. Or Cameroonian artist Angèle Etundi Essamba. Or the superstar from South Africa, Zanele Muholi. But obviously, it's a work in progress. It's a huge engagement for such a small team. We are just 4 with Camille Morino to create this database. So with 800 entries, we still don't have many important women artists, historically important, such as Amélie Guillot-Saguez, or Lady Clementina Howarden is still not on the website. Or surprisingly, Vivian Mayer is not on the website, so it's on its way, but still not published. Or this very important Japanese photographer, Ishushi Miyako, who was also the first woman who represented Japan at the Biennale in Venice. We published an interview with her, but still don't have the dictionary entry. Or Michaeline Thomas. So these are examples of artists I would like to include on our database as soon as possible. Obviously, we are a non-profit, so we are making fundraising to nourish our website with all these contents. As a conclusion, I would like to say that this website is for us a demonstration that women artists have always existed. They were numerous, which is important, and present in all the art movements. They experimented with different media, different forms. They worked individually, they worked collectively. In other words, it is impossible today, in my opinion, to do a show, a survey, without including not one, but many women artists. And the purpose of this website from the very beginning is also this. Our website acts as a proof. Thus, our strategy, in my opinion, is at odds with this outdated narrative of exceptional women or women artists as exceptional beings. Because our aim is to show not only the most famous artists, but all the other artists that still haven't been researched, and to encourage the younger generations to work of them, the younger generations of art historians, of curators, art critics. And so I hope that my little speech was the beginning of interest for some of them, for some of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Matylda. And for me, it is important to discuss about the research and the knowledge we have about these women, and also to make sure that we get access. And your website really is a very important resource. For my museum, for my team, we constantly go there, and what you showed is just a selection of artists working with photography, but your website, as you mentioned, it's much more than that. It goes really back in history. So in that sense, it's a very, very useful resource and very well done, and with podcasts and the cartoons, and in a way, it's a way to access in a very easy way to all this information. So I want now to introduce you to Susan Bright and to discuss more about practice as a curator or as an author of books. Suzanne Bright is based in London. She holds a PhD in curating from Goldsmiths, University of London. Suzanne has been a mentor to many artists, so she's really involved in the contemporary scene. She was a curator at the National Portrait Gallery in London before working as an independent curator. She has worked in various cities, London, New York, Paris. She has worked also with many different institutions, so it's also interesting to hear about what maybe you have to say about these different institutions in various countries, the Tate, Barbican, Royal Academy, Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago, St. Louis Museum of Art, Phoenix Art Museum, the New York Public Library, and so on. Suzanne was a guest curator in 2019 at Foto España, where she curated several shows. And this year, she's a co-curator of F-Stop 9 Festival für Fotografie in Leipzig, Germany. Suzanne has many books also that covers history of photography. And I just want, there's a lot I could mention. No, I'm not going, but I'm going to mention the last project, exhibition and books you produced, or the one I know, maybe there's a new one since, Feast for the Eyes, the story of food in photography. It shows how vast her interest in photography is, and it's not just about a list of names of artists. And this is also an exhibition that is still currently touring somewhere in the world. Suzanne.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Natalie for inviting me, and also to Paris Photo for their wonderful hospitality. It's really nice to be here. And when Natalie asked me to do this panel, I sent her a very grumpy reply, which I said, this is, of course it's not up to women to champion other women. It's up to everybody. I don't know what I'm going to talk about for an hour. And very graciously, Natalie told me that the title was provocative, and of course it is. It's about this is marketing, but these talks are there to get people in, and a provocative title does that. But I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let that word champion go. It kept bothering me, and it made me think about my practice, and if I do champion women. I think I was invited because I think people think that I do champion women, but I think I just do my job properly, and that obviously has implications for the women that I work with. So for those that don't know my work, very briefly, I'm a freelancer. I've been doing that since the 2000s. As Natalie said, I am employed widely by whoever wants to give me a job. And I do a lot of lectures and speaking. And I consider myself a feminist curator. Two terms here that are very elastic, feminist and curator. They're very dynamic words. They're very dynamic concepts which need constant reassessment, which I do all the time. And I just want to give an example of how I consider feminism in my practice. It's not just by supporting artists and photographers. I support women writers, curators, art handlers. It's all the way through my work. When I nominate, I get asked to nominate a lot. I will always nominate a woman because I feel that they're not represented enough. So do I champion women? Maybe I do. So I've just contradicted myself immediately. And I think that's kind of important too. I think it's always important to be self-aware and think about these terms and what you do. So as I said, I don't think, I see myself as just doing my job properly and doing it with care. And I don't have a distinct role like my other panelists. So I'm just going to note some things that I've seen recently. They're not conclusions, they're just things that have made me think. The first one, I was given a print recently by an artist for all the work that I do for women artists. And I was really kind of surprised by that. And I just think, well, I've always been a feminist, and for me, a lot of it is counting. And I remember I did an art history degree, and it was at the end of the third year when we had the feminist lecture with Cindy Sherman and Barbara Kruger that I realized I'd just spent 3 years studying art history and not looked at any women at all. I mean, there was a reason for that historically, but that wasn't even told. There was nothing about why women were not allowed to enter the academy. It was just the history was a male history. And since then, I have always just counted. Whenever I go to an exhibition, I count. Whenever I pick up a book, I count. And I have been, all my career, the woman that people roll their eyes at when I say, where are the women? And people are used to that now. People are all saying that now. But I do feel I've been banging. I do feel like I've been on this panel since the beginning of my career. I went through my books and exhibitions to count the women. And I kind of felt okay. I did feel kind of relieved that I walked the talk, as it were. You are under huge pressure as a writer of quite commercial books to put big names in. Those big names are usually men, apart from Cindy Sherman. So I went through some recent books. A survey book by, I'm not going to name names, I'm not like that. I looked through a big survey book recently by a male author by Tamsin Hudson. Over 250 photographs, less than 30 were by men. Another one, which was a book of essays by another male author, 25 were male, 7 were female. Charlotte Janssen's just done like a photography now, 22 male, 28 female. And Emma Lewis has just done another book on feminist history. So it's not up to women to champion other women, but it looks like we are. Okay, that's one observation. Like I said, no conclusions. A second observation is that I noticed something on Instagram, of course, because that's where we notice things now. And it was by a post by Francis Hodgson, who's a British critic. And he had a little exhibition of his work as a writer, which doesn't often happen. And what he noticed was that most of his essays were for men. And he wasn't happy with that. He didn't like it. And it's a kind of, hadn't realized that was the case. And just for people who don't know how it works, when you write an essay for an artist, you're asked by an artist. So he had obviously been asked by men to write those essays. So I thought, I'll look through my essays and see my last 10 essays, who were they by? Who asked me? So 8 women asked me, of which some of them are in the audience, so it's really nice to see them. And 2 were for men. I've got 3 more coming up, and they're all for women. And it's not because I've chosen them, it's because they've asked me and I like their work. That's how writing essays works. My last observation is it's a little bit about virtue signaling. I noticed that after the Me Too moment, suddenly there were a lot of male curators and critics who were doing all-female shows, who had never expressed any interest in promoting or championing women before. And it made me feel really uncomfortable. I also noticed that after the death of George Floyd, actually the same guys were doing the same about artists of color, and it really sat badly with me. It felt very disingenuous. I now notice that those curators that were championing women after the Me Too have switched allegiances. This is not all men. Of course it's not. I know that. And often in a career, you learn, you get mentored. One of my first bosses at the National Portrait Gallery had been championing Edwardian women photographers all his career. He collected a lot of women. So, I learned. Val Williams is another curator that I work with. when I was younger who has always championed women. So again, it's kind of what you see and how you navigate your career. So just briefly, I just want to talk about a project called Home Truths, which I did about motherhood, 12 artists, 2 men. It's really important that men were in that exhibition. I don't think mothering is a woman's issue. And there's something that came up doing that exhibition that a lot of those artists did not like to be called mother artists. In a lot of ways that I know that female artists don't want to be called a female artist. They don't want to be pulled out as separated. I think what you said was brilliant, that female artists should not be an exception. And they should be in all shows, which brings me why I don't like all-female shows. They don't work for me. It feels othering. I don't like collection policies that just kind of concentrate on women in big museums, because I feel that those holes are never filled. It feels like it's leaning into a system, and it's a system that should be changed. So as I said, observations, no great conclusions. I'm sure people will disagree with me. I'm sure I've contradicted myself. I think we all want the same things, but we have different ways of going about it. I think we all want equality. I assume we all want equality, but I also know that I should not assume things anymore. I've been in this job a long time, so I see things come round. When there are big female shows, there's always a feeling of like, oh, we've shown the women, let's get back to normal. So do I champion women? I'm going to use a fashion metaphor. I don't wear one brand, but I'm not fashion forward, obviously. But I do feel that I'm women forward, if that makes any sense. It's a bad metaphor. And all these terms are nuanced and subtle, and I think that's important. I think we're losing that, and it can't all be kind of captioned with a hashtag. So that's my stand on it.
Thank you, Suzanne, for this introduction. And before we are going to have an exchange, of course, between the 3 panelists. But I want first now to introduce you to Charlotte EYERMAN. I was thinking it's important we have the perspective of the research, the curatorship, curation, and I also wanted to bring this the idea of the private collection and the responsibility we have when we handle a collection. So Charlotte EYERMAN is an art historian, director and chief curator of the J.P. Morgan Chase Art Collection. And you can see there's a booth, not just a little bit in this Galerie Eiffel. So you can see a glimpse of some works. She joined the J.P. Morgan Chase in 2017, and before that, she worked in museum, in non-profit, private sector, and academia. So she has a different perspective, of course. Charlotte earned a MA and PhD in the history of art at the University of California at Berkeley. She's a specialist in modern and contemporary art. She curated exhibitions, wrote publications, and she is also a speaker on the international scene. Charlotte.
Thank you. Merci. Bonne soirée. My distinguished fellow panelists, it's my honor to be here. I'm representing the J.P. Morgan Chase Art Collection. We're a corporate collection. It is museum quality, and yet we're not a museum. It's wonderful to be back in Paris after 2 years. For 10 years, we've celebrated a partnership as the primary sponsor of Paris Photo. And everything we do is a collaborative effort. So we work in a very large financial services institution. And with great affection for all the museum colleagues that I worked with in the past and my former academic colleagues, this is the best art experience I have had as a professional, because I work with an incredible collection and incredible colleagues. We're an international organization. Our collection is museum quality, and we were founded in 1959 by David Rockefeller, and the program was called Art at Work because he believed, he was a collector personally. His mother was a founder of MoMA. It's very important that an extremely enlightened catalyst got this going in over 60 years ago. And our collection, even though David Rockefeller, when he founded the collection as Chase, and our company has grown and evolved and changed in those many years, it is not the same company today. It's much bigger. The collection has always been international. His focus for the corporate collection, Art at Work, and it was branded that way because he believed that art in the workplace would elevate the experience of working at and doing business with our company. We are primarily focused on the art collection to engage our colleagues, our clients, and our communities. We're a global organization, and everywhere we are, there is art from the collection. His personal collection was very blue chip. His vision for the corporate collection, which became a model for most corporate collections, whether law firms or other financial services institutions, et cetera, insurance companies, was focused on emerging artists. We continue to carry that legacy. Our motto is that art is a catalyst for connection with these groups. First and foremost, we serve our employees who are all over the world and very diverse. Our clients and customers all over the world and very diverse. Our communities, the same. We are very focused on artists who are emerging globally, and we're also very locally connected. That's a very important principle for us. We've got a very clear collection strategy that reflects our company's business and social values and geographic priorities. Paris Photo is one of the few times that we share our collection in a public way. We've got fabulous content on the OVR, on the Paris Photo website. Please follow us on Instagram. There is live Instagramming happening now. And we did the first live stream on the JP Morgan Instagram in 2 years the other day. And we're really delighted to share with you what we've brought to Paris. But what's important to remember is that our collection has always been diverse. David Rockefeller and his committee, there was an art committee. Now we're very fortunate they hire professionals and they trust us, which is a wonderful experience. And we are a small team, a little bigger than Aware, but not much, overseeing this collection. David Rockefeller and his colleagues in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s when they were active, and then they started hiring professional directors. And the first 2 directors were men. And then the last 2, I'm only the 4th director of the art collection. My predecessor was a woman. I am a woman. I identify as a woman. And it's an incredible collection that has been diverse since the beginning in terms of gender, ethnicity, cultural background, geography. David Rockefeller and his colleagues were buying art by women. They were buying art by black artists. They were buying art by Asian artists and Latin artists and artists from all over EMEA and Africa. So it's always been diverse. So I'm going to share a little bit of what we've brought this year. And by we, I mean my curatorial team. My colleague Jason Molchano, senior curator, is in the front row. Wave, Jason. Jason is based in Chicago, where he started working with a collection that was founded by the First National Chicago. So our collection grows and evolves as our company does. There's a lot of incredible material in that collection that was not focused on contemporary art. It goes back to antiquity, as a matter of fact. We're keepers and stewards of this collection, so we maintain those things that come to us from other companies. But our mandate is to continue to be a dynamic, living, evolving collection, and we focus on diversities of all kinds. We are proud to say that our percentage at Perry Photo is higher than 34%, I think over 50%, and women are not a minority. We're at least 52% of the population globally. But we're pleased to show a lot of different kinds of photography. We are leading this year with a digital and new media exhibition called Overwhelming Illusion, which is a title generated from artificial intelligence. And our lead image for this exhibition is work by Petra Courtwright, who is a leading digital artist. Her entire practice is digital. She's based in LA. She is millennial. Her work is gorgeous. It's interesting. She uses artificial intelligence in her practice. So we were inspired when we invented our title. So this is part of our exhibition that Nathalie mentioned. We do have a gallery, a booth, where ours is not commercial. We're here sharing an exhibition. And the digital and new media is the blue part of our gallery. Many people have noted that they like our Yves Klein blue. That was very intentional. And this is Petra Courtwright. The clicker is not very helpful. Allison Janae Hamilton, a young African-American artist, also emerging in her career. We made a commitment to digital art when I started with a collection about 4 years ago. And another curator on our team, Jessica, who is not here with us but was acknowledged on my cover slide. She and I, interestingly, are often looking at the same thing. We collaborate on our collection acquisitions. Jason and Jessica and I, we all worked together. So again, and I agree with Susan, no, women are not the only ones who can champion women artists. I have many predecessors who were male, who were also acquiring artworks by women artists. This one is a still from a video by Janet Biggs, who has a really fascinating practice, very involved in matters of science and natural history, outer space. This is actually a video that she filmed in Java, and she also has done residencies at NASA's Mars Space Station, boot camp in the desert in the western United States. And then we also have Rinko Kawachi. This is a video by a Japanese woman artist that we acquired at Paris Photo. I believe this was acquired in, what does it say when we acquired it? 2017 or 2018. And a lot of the works that we brought back to Paris Photo, we acquired at Paris Photo, including that video. The artist Lebohang Kaganye, who is South African, and I was interested in the AWARE group of artists. We have many of those artists in our collection. Zanele, Micheline Thomas, Berenice Abbott, like old and new. So it's interesting that there is some overlap there. We're often among the first, if not the first, institutional collector of the emerging artists in our collection. We have a big commitment to artists all over the world, but we did a special focus on South Africa starting in 2018, and we continue to focus on South African artists. One of the artists we're featuring in our exhibition this year, I'll get to in a moment, Alice Mann, is also represented in this year's show. So we have a two-part exhibition celebrating our return to Paris Photo after 2 years. And we've got several women artists. These are physical photographs that we acquired from the galleries in advance of the fair, all showing at Paris Photo 2021. This is Sandrine Rousseau, a French artist, represented by Gallery 127, based in Paris and Morocco, with whom we've worked in the past. We also acquired works the past few Paris Photo iterations of Carole Benita, who is Moroccan and French. This is an abstract work. We think very practically about art because we're not a museum, we're not open to the public. Our artwork goes into our spaces all over the world, and we think about artworks that we can hang up in offices and client centers and lobbies and corridors. And this is a work by Sarah Ann Johnson, a Canadian artist, very much about ideas of nature and photography as a hybrid media. Our approach to photography is extremely diverse in terms of digital, new media, AI, all different kinds of approaches. She actually paints her photographs. This is from the Yossi Milo Gallery, from whom we've also acquired work by, for example, most recently, Kyle Meyer. And in addition to women, and you did mention this, Nathalie, we also celebrate diversities of all kind, including gender diversity and LGBTQ plus artists and artists who may be trans or non-binary. And this is true not just of photography, but of all the media that we have in our collection. So I do think that's important to recognize. Our collection is extremely diverse in every possible definition. Another work we acquired for this year that we're sharing is by Karen Knorr, a British artist represented by, German artist represented by the London Gallery, Augusta Edwards, photographing in India. This is a work by the Russian artist Anastasia Samoilova, who is showing in Curiosa. And that was a curated, every year there's a curated Curiosa, and Shoher from the Tate curated this section. We made the selection before we knew that. She's represented by Caroline O'Brien. And again, there are a lot of women gallerists as well. You mentioned that, Susan, about supporting, and I love that you mentioned art handlers, because the head of our art handling operation is a woman, and she's here with us today, Anna, who is very instrumental in helping us bring this together. Alice Mann, a South African photographer acquired from the legendary Afronova Gallery, which also has French origins. And we've worked with them quite a bit. Gorgeous photograph, and we already know that this is going into the office of a very high-level colleague who oversees corporate responsibility. So our artwork goes into space. This is a very practical art collection. The other thing that we're focusing on, and I'm calling out the women in our 10-year highlights, in our exhibition gallery down the hall in the blue room, the Yves Klein blue room with digital and video and new media, we also have a smaller screen celebrating 10 years of partnership between JP Morgan and Paris Photo. And this has been a really wonderful experience for our colleagues, for our guests. We're focusing on artists. You can see the range from Cindy Sherman to Graciela Iturbide, that's another one. Shirin Nishat, which we brought to in our exhibition a couple years ago. Tina Barney, this was in an exhibition several years ago. I always want to say Megan Rippenhoff and Mariah Robertson in the same sentence. Mariah Robertson is that abstract work. That's a very large work that's going to one of our locations out west in the U.S. and California. The gorgeous Ayanna V. Jackson, which we featured as our lead image a few years ago in our portraiture exhibition. Ditto Myra Green, the kind of detail of the eye, of the ear and the nose using a 19th century technology. And finally, the Laurie Simmons, which is an enormous photograph. And how they got it here, I don't know. But that is what we are sharing with you. And this is the required information that I have to put on the screen with our material. So we appreciate your attention and interest in the JP Morgan Chase Art Collection and what we do. And we're thrilled to be back at Paris Photo. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, Charlotte. I just want to open a few questions now, and I hope we have still some time, a couple of minutes, 10 minutes to discuss, so it's not so long. There have been many conversations around what it means to be an artist and what it means to be a woman. But I also, and it's a question for you, Susan, because it's a lot of, I would say, old women from the older generation, they resist to be categorized in this women's artist. It's like for them a limitation. And sometimes they don't even want me to come up with this concept because they think, no, I don't want to be in this kind of group show, or I don't want to be categorized like that. And I have that feeling that the older generation are more like resistant to this category. So I would like to ask, what are your feelings about the new generation and the way they would accept to be around among other women and older generations?
Well, I think that there are more women being shown now, so it's not an exception anymore. I think that post-Me Too, I think it was a real watershed moment that curators were suddenly held to account, and they had to have a better spread of who they were showing. I always think of writers and novelists. They want to. Can't think of any novelist would want to be seen as a lady novelist. It's somehow very diminishing. And I think that's what female artists feel, that often if you're going to be put into an all-female show, that's the lens and the prism that the work is going to be looked at, that somehow it's different, and it's not. So I think the younger generation are a bit more resistant to it, but it's not coming up for them so much. Now I'm going to contradict myself. I'm just kind of going back to the mothering a bit, but I've found that my generation often kept mothering quiet. It was something that you kept secret. Whereas this young generation are definitely not about that. They are very wearing their motherhood very proudly, and that's a big difference as well. So I think, I'm sure I answered your question, but I think there is a difference.
Yeah, I have the feeling that there's a distinct. Mothering is a very good element you mentioned here, because I've met artists aged 50 something, and suddenly during the discussion they would mention that it was difficult for them when they had kids at home, make dinner at night and go to openings and to create a network. And we know how much network is important. And I have the feeling that this discussion is much more open now with this younger generation. And also the fact that when female artists today are among other female artists, they feel quite happy and they have no problem with that. They don't see it as a limitation. I don't have this feeling that for this younger generation, it is a kind of limited narrative in that sense. That's just the experience I had. But Matylda, I have another question for you, because in 2020, the Baltimore Museum of Art, I don't know if you know that, decided to collect only works by female artists, specifically, and they announced, they communicated about that. And at the end of the year, they gave results about that. So what do you think about these kind of actions to really, like, in that case, limit and to just ignore male artists and to make sure that it's just female artists who are purchased for a collection?
It joins also the idea, the thing you said about all women shows, that it sounds like othering. Collecting only women artists could sound like othering. I think it's a pragmatic approach, and I think when we speak about women artists in the art world, we need also to be pragmatic. In the same way we are pragmatic about women in politics, for example. So I'm thinking about the quota. I don't know how we say in English quota, but you know, the number of women we define in a specific field. So I was impressed by this politics of the Baltimore Museum. I think even after a year of acquisitions of works only by women artists, they still didn't have the gender parity in their collection. So even 1 year is not sufficient when we see, I don't know exactly, I don't remember now what was the percentage of women artists in the collection. I think it was 4. So they really have a lot of time and a lot of work to do. I think at the Centre Pompidou it's around 20%, and I remember this study that was published maybe 2 years ago that was showing that the American collections in American museums had more or less 11% of women artists in their collection. So this means that we can collect only women artists for 10 years and we will still not be in parity. So I'm not shocked by this politics. I think it's useful, it's pragmatic. And men can wait a little bit.
Yeah, but there's room for everybody. I mean, our percentages are better than that, by the way. But, you know, I'd just like to share a few examples, which is that in 1960, the J.P. Morgan, at the time it was the Chase Art Collection, it's evolved, but we call it the J.P. Morgan Chase Art Collection, acquired a Joan Mitchell painting that was made in 1959, and it's spectacular. And we do lend to museum exhibitions. That's one of the ways that we make our collection available. But in 1961, they also bought a very beautiful, small print, work on paper, by an artist named Norma Morgan, who's no relationship, as far as I know, to JP, who is a black woman artist. And when you focus on emerging artists, and they were also buying Asian artists and Latin artists and African artists, when you focus on emerging artists, we talk about the market, because a lot of what we're talking about is the sway of the market. And Susan, to your point about museum curators, I think curators have always been more open. It's not just curators, it's the decision making, it's the boards, it's the leadership. Curators, I think, are very close to these issues because we're a corporate collection. So, yeah, I represent us, and it's my great honor to be in this role. It's an ambassadorial one, but we are a collective. A corporate collection is by nature not a person. And so we have very clear criteria. And I just want to acknowledge that my colleague, who was meant to be here, is a man, Darren Odioye, who unfortunately could not come. He oversees the art, and then we also have a corporate history collection. I did want us to be represented by a man on this panel.
Me too.
So I'm representing him. I am the director of the art collection. We work very closely together. But when you focus on emerging artists of color, artists who are women artists who have been historically marginalized are less valuable, and that phenomenon you were talking about big names in books and exhibitions, it is a truism, not just in the art world, about like what is the brand name recognition. But because we were founded with this vision, and because we continue that, we're very consistent. We pay attention to art and artists, even though we do track like how many artists can we, because we have this very diverse company, we want to be able to show this percentage. We're very open, and we try to represent different groups vigorously without getting overly represented in one area, but we also look at thematics like technology and sustainability. And that's why we didn't call out women video artists. They're videos that are about all different kinds of things: nature, technology, stories of families, different kinds of media. So we just tend to be very synthetic in the way that we think, and it's not a quota, it's not like checking a box, but it's just how we've integrated, how we synthesize what our mission is. Every collection needs a mission, a vision, and a strategy, and we're very fortunate to have one that's very clear and very structured. And you can see just from the small handful of images I showed you, and there's a lot more in our collection than photography. We have sculpture, we have, paintings, we have all kinds of things. It works on paper. Photography is a huge core, but even from what I showed you, you can see that it's not bland, it's not boring, it's not one-dimensional, and there is no one kind of women's art. We have to think about the artist and not be kind of held back by those categories.
I see that time is running, but I want to ask a last question, because you represent an American collection. Susan, you're right.
It's international.
I know it's international, but I have the feeling still that the way you approach it is very different from what we can see here in Europe. I don't know if we have a similar collection, maybe Matylda, that Charlotte just described in France. Susan, you are based now in London, but Paris. Matylda, you studied in England, but now you are in Paris. So I would like to bring this issue about where we are, because Paris is not New York or is not London, and maybe the resistance is not the same. I don't know if, Susan, because you have this experience of working in different countries, if you have the feeling that some of this discussion we are not always everywhere on the same level.
Yeah, I think it varies with each country and within each institution, so it's really hard to generalize. Whereas, yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to just leave it at that it is hard to kind of make claims about a country.
But Charlotte, do you have the feeling that, because yes, you are international, but do you have the feeling that your collection could be the same if it would be born in France or Europe? You have the feeling that from the beginning you would have the same attention?
That's an excellent question, Natalie, for which we do not have time. I will say that corporate art collecting really goes back to, Siena and Florence in the 15th century. I mean, those were the first corporate collections. I think David Rockefeller as the model and his notion is distinctly American, and yet he had a very international lens. I do think it speaks to also the difference, and this is a whole other topic, in France, in Europe, and I also lived in France, and I've lived in Italy and Germany. The European system is different. We Americans don't have a lot of public support for the arts. And that's a whole other topic. But Susan mentioned the Academy, and if you think about the Louvre and the Academy and what have you, public institutions, Americans are by nature entrepreneurial. Our cultural institutions have very little public support, especially government support. Somehow we both were at the St. Louis Art Museum but missed each other. That is one of the rare museums with a lot of public support, but we don't have federal level support, which is another topic. But it is, I think, distinctly American with the entrepreneurial nature of it. But our company, we're everywhere. We're in 60 countries. So I hope that people might be inspired, because corporate art collection does make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Matylda, do you have the feeling that the association were born in France, and even though it's translated, do you have the feeling that the people who visit the website are mostly here, or do you feel that there's a need for such research from other countries?
We are based in France, but we work internationally. I think right now, still the biggest part of our public, of the users of the website, are based in France. But the number of the users from abroad is growing, and it's really growing every day. And we also work through partnerships with different institutions. We just started a new partnership with the Clark Institute. So we work with American institutions, for example, with the British...
Which is in Williamstown, Massachusetts, for people who don't know where the Clark is.
Yes, exactly. But also to answer your question about the differences, cultural differences. I was trained in France. I studied 1 year in the UK, but did almost all my education in France. And I think the main difference is that the French universalism resists to the statistics. And it's all kinds of statistics: gender statistics, ethnic statistics, religious statistics. It's quite difficult sometimes to have numbers in France. But I think that things are changing quite quickly in recent years. There is a real change. I see the Ministry of Culture, with which we work very closely, is pushing French institutions toward more equality, towards more gender equality, and AWARE is part of many projects in encouraging museums to do it.
And the new director of the Louvre is a woman.
Is a woman.
Which is major league.
Yes, exactly. And I think symbolically it's very important. I remember maybe 5 years ago I spoke with a friend, and I told him the day the new director of the Louvre is a woman, it means that something really changed in France. And so it happened this year. But to answer also your question, the question of the whole talk, if it's up to women to champion women artists, obviously the answer is no. But I still think, and this is my point of view from AWARE, is that women still have to talk for themselves, speak for themselves. And this is very important. This is what we try to do at AWARE. We publish interviews with women artists. We publish a lot of women art historians. So obviously the aim is not that the women cover the whole field of women artists and there is no room for male art historians. But it's very important that we also have the voice. And so we can speak for ourselves, and artists can speak also for themselves, and not to be only discovered and continuously rediscovered by the art historian, but they can be visible through their work.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your participation. And it's already 6:10, and we are going to continue these panels, so I have to interrupt, but it's very interesting, and thank you again for your contribution to this afternoon.